Let me ask you this. Are you a finisher or are you a dabbler?
In today's episode, we'll explore how your approach to tech training and learning in general can make or break your success.
So, are you a finisher or are you a dabbler, Paloma?
I'm a finisher.
Yes, you are. But in general, what it means is, do you have a history of completing things that you've started? Because if you look at some people, they have a pattern of being super excited about a project, something, anything else,
Any challenge.
super excited. They start high, but they never finish. 2 months later, you tell them, hey, how about that project you were working on?
And we all have failures, right?
Yeah. But some people have more than others. Not necessarily failures. Sometimes...
missed attempts.
No. Sometimes they don't even allow it to get to a point where you can say you failed. Because if you are taking on a project, you get sidetracked halfway, you didn't even complete it or give it a real try. You didn't fail. You just dropped it, which I think is different. And some people have a pattern of doing this with everything in their lives. And the reason why this is a very important question to ask yourself if you are going into tech, it's because you will be tested. You will need to be able to finish one thing. And it ties very well with the concept we talked about, which is the shiny object syndrome. If you're not a finisher, you get distracted and on many different directions easily.
You'll pivot.
You'll pivot so many times you might get a vertigo or something. But seriously, you need to have.
And we all have that friend who
Yes.
this season he's opening a business. Next season he wants to go back to school.
And next season
The other
he's
season
studying for this certification.
He sees potential in something pharmaceutical.
Or next season he's a trader. He's trading stocks online.
Yeah.
We all have this friend, and it's important to identify this in yourself. If that's the case for you, you have to make sure you address that, because breaking into tech will test you.
Definitely.
You know, it will test you. You have to be able, and there are trainings, there are support for that, and we offer that kind of support at Yellowtail Tech, where you are forced to develop a long-term plan, and you position yourself in an environment that's rooting for you and that's giving you.
And it's so gratifying to finish something, and I actually think that's one of the things that I like the most out of my second career that I didn't get from my first career. My first career, I was a social scientist. You don't really see the results.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes you're working on things that require laws, big organizations to do things, communities to change their behavior. So you, as that young social scientist, you don't get to see the fruition.
Yeah.
But when you're working in tech and you have a very finite project, you have to engineer a solution to solve a problem. You have 3 months to do it. You are going to see that baby go from A to Z.
Yeah, and you have to actually build a long-term mindset, because just starting something and finishing it, it's not an easy task.
No.
I was talking to Cyrus last night about that on this very podcast, and he was saying how he had to do a lot of work on himself to change his mindset. And the best way to do that is to put yourself in an environment where that's celebrated, that's encouraged, and you get the tools for that. Because you don't just become a finisher. If you were a dabbler, unless you change a lot in your environment and your way of thinking and your way of moving through the world, nothing is going to change, you know?
Yeah.
Because the reality is, there is so much resistance that's going to happen in terms of your family, money,
Time. Your
emergency.
Mm-hmm.
So my theory is, the world or the universe is always pushing back at what you want, just to make sure, just to test how
Your
much
commitment.
you really want it. So the pushback is just feedback, meaning you get the pushback, and the whole idea is, oh, I'm getting the pushback, it means I need to push further.
Yeah.
Because at one point it's going to give in, but it needs to know that you really want this. So you have to build that resilience and to be able to push back against all those
Yeah.
real things that are going to happen. It's
I'm
not
adamant
excuses.
about finishing things, like, and it's one of the things that I hope my daughter gets from us. Like, we all have these scenarios where we miss it, right? Like, we couldn't finish. I don't know if that's a career, I don't know if that's a race, a goal that you had to lose 20 pounds or to gain 15 pounds of muscle. I don't know what it is, but we all have that one thing. And it's up to us to kind of teach our brain and our body
Yep.
that we can finish things. Because the more we fail at things or we miss, to not call it a failure, the more it becomes normal.
Yeah, and that's why I specifically do that exercise with my daughter. First of all, I don't allow her to start a book and not finish it. That's a rule. You start a book, before you jump to the next book, you finish this. I always tell her, in this house, we are finishers. We watch a movie, it's not a great movie, but let's see it through.
I'm going to hide some books.
No, I'm serious. Because, like you said, it's practice.
I know.
And
Actually, I remember one thing where I felt like I failed. Like, I tried to be a triathlete, and I got injured when I was going into my first race. I injured my shoulder and my neck. And I had made such a big investment. Like, I spent a whole winter waking up at 4:30 to go learn how to swim. Mm-hmm. I invested in a $2,000 bike. Mm-hmm. I ran countless miles while I hated to run. And I remember when I injured myself, it's like, you know what? I acknowledge that maybe triathlons are not for me because the time commitment that they require was not what I was willing to do in that moment. But I said, I owe it to myself to complete something else that feels uncomfortable.
Yeah, and also...
And that's how I got into running. And I said, I'm going to do a marathon. And I did.
Yeah, but also it's about how... what message you send your mind. Because I follow this guy, Tom Billier. He tells you every time you start something, you don't finish it, you unconsciously send a message to yourself that you are
not a finisher.
Exactly. And this, you basically don't realize that you are reinforcing this behavior. So he has this concept he calls gaining credibility with yourself. Every time you start something and you actually finish it, you get more credibility with yourself, and which is very, very important. Because if not, the opposite is going to happen also. You're going to get to a point where you don't even believe you can start and finish anything. Because that's the biggest question we get asked when students are considering the program. They're like, well, do you think I'm going to be able to finish? We're like, we don't know. I don't know what was the last time you finished something hard. I don't know when was the last time you took on a challenge. This question is for you to answer. It's a very personal.
Yeah, and the other thing is sometimes, like, I feel that like the people that come to us can be very harsh on themselves. If the last time that you set yourself up for a challenge of this degree was probably when you attempted to go to college.
Yeah.
And you didn't, you dropped out. But you were 18.
Yeah.
Now you're 32. Are you the same person? Not necessarily, right? Like,
Not necessarily, but you it's been also 20 years you haven't been practicing that muscle
Yes,
of finishing
of
things.
course.
So it gets tricky, you know. Of course, you get more mature, you get more resolute, but that muscle of commitment and finishing hasn't been tested and
But
worked
you also
out.
you have less distractions, right? Like now those new sneakers won't make you lose your sleep.
Yeah.
Partying won't make you lose your sleep, hopefully. Maybe you've raised a few sons and you've gotten through that.
And not only that,
Like-
your situation also becomes more urgent.
Yes.
Because when I see students,
You have that fire under your
yeah, because you say, hey, I'm turning 40 and I still don't have a career, and this is my occasion.
or I'm making as much money as my nephew who's 15 years younger.
Yeah.
Like
And those things can really light a fire, you know, under your butt. But nonetheless, being able to finish something, being a finisher is very important. Ask yourself this question and answer it. Make sure you answer it for yourself. Make sure you understand how you're going to navigate. But you have to make sure you are a finisher if you're about to get into tech and actually break into the industry.